am live here? If I am, this is my first time doing this, so please forgive any technical issues. If anyone is here in the chat, if you can let me know that you're here, that you hear me, that would be super amazing. I do see some people in the chat, or I see my good friend Bobby, and then I see Willow who left something. Yay, okay, yay, Ashley is here and can hear me. Yay, great. So I'm not quite sure how I see how many people are here, but I can see the chat through my streaming software, so that's good. Yay. Thank you so much, Ashley and Willow, for being here. Oh, and I think maybe I can see that there are 5 people here, so that's amazing. Yeah, this is my first time going live, and I'm not planning to get too complicated with the technical stuff today, so if my picture is here and you can hear my voice, that is perfect. And I can see the chat, so that is also great. So welcome to Collapse Times, your weekly Skywatch from inside the unraveling. My name is Hummingbird, in case you're new here, and I'm gonna try to be here every week from now on. This Sunday live stream is something that I've been feeling the nudge to do for years. I did try it for a little while, about 1.5 years ago on Instagram, but I think this is going to be much better on YouTube because I can actually show you some visuals of the astrology. Just so you know, I do have a brand new other channel, Horoscopes by Hummingbird, if you want personalized rising sign advice for the new moon every month, as well as for longer term transits. Like I just posted Jupiter and Cancer horoscopes up over there. So check that channel out. Subscribe if you like it. And I also just set up memberships on this channel. So eventually there will be perks for members. There will be private live chats or live streams or other things that I can offer. But right now there's just one level of membership. It's $2.99 a month, and it will just support me and fill my heart with joy and encourage me to keep going with this project. So I do hope that I am right on time with starting these live streams. It feels very concurrent to the Jupiter-Saturn square that I've been talking about all year as a major turning point for the whole year, and especially, so we're going to talk a little bit today about how that is manifesting in the mundane astrology and the current events that are happening. But I do also want to stress how important and significant this transit is for everybody on an individual level. This is really the kind of energy that if you use it proactively, if you really grab the reins, you can make a big shift in your own life over the course, especially of the month of June. And I just published a video today that goes into a lot more depth about that, about how to work with the energies of this square. It is not an energetic that things are just going to happen without you putting in some effort. And I think that the metaphor of a lever is very useful for understanding this energy. A lever is just a simple machine where you have a rigid beam and you have a fulcrum point, and by putting in effort on one side of the beam, you can lift something that's on the other side that is much heavier than something you'd be able to lift just on your own. So in the case of this square, Saturn in Aries is the place where you really need to put in the effort. This is where you would need to be pressing down the beam with all of your strength if you were trying to lift something on the other side. Jupiter in Cancer is the benevolence of the lever itself, and the fact that this simple machine enables you to move something much bigger and much heavier than you could do with just your own strength. So I recommend checking out my video that came out earlier this morning for a deep dive into those energies and how you can use them more proactively. Yeah, today we're going to talk a little about the current events and just, flowing right along with this consequential astrology are definitely some consequential events that are happening in the world. Later, I'll be at the technological point where I can pull up like news articles and videos and show you guys images of ice running people over and all of these wild things that are happening right now. I can't do that today, but I'm sure most of y'all have seen that. And if not, there are plenty of places where you can look up, the very intense energies that are coming out in some cities around the United States at this time. I also think that the Gaza Freedom Flotilla is on its way to Gaza right now with aid for the starving people there, and Israel has threatened to intercept this small boat and possibly to attack them, possibly to detain them, possibly to eliminate them. That was the word that was used in one of the quotes from the fake country government that I saw earlier. So this also feels very aligned with the intense energy of the square. And then there's also people are starting to gather towards Egypt right now, and there's an international coalition that is planning to start a march from Egypt into Gaza, and that is scheduled to start on June 15th, the exact day of the Jupiter-Saturn square. So I'm going to talk more about America in this live stream because I figured this is kind of a unique perspective that I can provide. I'm going to talk about the United States natal chart and how the Jupiter-Saturn square is impacting it. But I did want to name those other amazing, beautiful, revolutionary, subversive events that are happening right now. And all of these things, including the protests against ICE and against fascism in the United States, all of these things are really, really empowering, positive, well-used manifestations of this energy. Like I said, Jupiter-Saturn square, this is energy where you gotta act in order to make something come to fruition, in order to really generate the potential benefits of the energies. And people are doing it. People are acting, and I'm so grateful to everyone putting their lives on the line, their physical bodies on the line, as well as many other things to do with the potential comfort of their lives. In the case of the Freedom Flotilla and the March on Gaza, obviously people are willing to sacrifice their own comfort and aspects of their lives in order to hopefully bring aid to the people of Gaza. And also there is an element of Jupiter in Cancer that is about revelation. Jupiter anywhere kind of pulls back the veil or the roof or the membrane and kind of reveals what's underneath, makes it harder not to see. And I think that is something that is happening too, both with these protests in the US and with these actions to stop the genocidal Israeli government. I guess I'm going to say the actual name of that government on these live streams. I've been always saying the fake country in my videos, which feels kind of like a spiritual protection, and it also just feels good to not give that country the full name. But I don't know, it seems like the name is wanting to come out here. Maybe that's because I do need to name it directly. Okay. And so I'm going to pull up the United States natal chart in just a minute. I'm going to focus on my analysis of that for this live stream. And then at the end, I'm going to pull 2 oracle cards that I'm going to try to make that a ritual of the live streams each week that are going to be guidance for each of us individually moving through the coming week. So let's go ahead and bring this chart up here. So this is the natal chart of the United States in the inner circle, and then we have the current positions of the planets on the outer circle. And for those who aren't familiar, this is a version of the United States natal chart that's called the Sibley chart. An astrologer with the last name of Sibley delineated it at some point, and it comes from some historical research that indicates that the exact timing of the Declaration of Independence was at 5:10 p.m. So there are other charts that people use. There are other timings that people use for July 4th, 1776. And there are other potential birthdays for the United States. So this isn't the only chart, but this chart definitely has some very potent descriptors of how this country has manifested since it was violently born 249 years ago. I'm going to talk mostly about these Cancer placements that are in the 7th and 8th house, and then Saturn and Neptune moving at the very bottom of this chart. So, if you hear a basic astrologer talk about the US natal chart and talk about these Cancer placements, if you hear someone who has no analysis of empire and of the bloody beginnings of the United States, they will describe these Cancer placements as a reflection of America's natural abundant resources. So all of the arable land in this country, providing for the Cancerian themes of food and nourishment. And because these planets are in the 7th and 8th house, so in mundane astrology, those areas of the chart refer to a country's both allies and open enemies is the traditional definition, but definitely a country's allies, a country's the other countries that they are associated with. And so people will also associate these Cancer placements here with things like the Marshall Plan and USAID, which are these examples of the United States providing resources for other countries around the world. So I want to give a different interpretation of this Cancer energy. I want to give a imperialism informed definition here. So I see a few different things, especially the Sun and Mercury in the 8th house. Of course, the 8th house is a house that relates to death. And the 8th house is also associated with inheritance. And the very first time that I looked at this chart, I think I might have had a slightly different version that maybe had all the Cancer in the 8th house. But the very first time that I looked at this, I was like, oh, this is describing our karmic inheritance. So obviously, the entity that calls itself the United States stole the land and all of the resources, all of the abundance that is described by this Cancer. And I think it being, especially the Sun being in the 8th house, one layer of that is the fact that by committing that theft, those of us living in the United States today, and especially those of us benefiting from this theft, have an inheritance. And it is a karmic inheritance, and it is a karmic debt. And how we engage with that, how we maybe try to pay that back is going to look different for everyone. But I think that if you are trying to understand the United States natal chart from a perspective of somebody who is actually realistic about the origins of this country and how it shows up today, you can understand these 8th house placements as that kind of an inheritance, something that needs to be grappled with and held as a karmic debt. Also, so every sign has a shadow side. But Cancer, it might be one that what the shadow is a little less intuitive, especially what the deep shadow is. You can say Cancer has shadows of mood swings and giving too much, that kind of thing, depleting itself for caring for others. But there's a deeper, darker shadow also to Cancer. And I really started to think about this and understand this when I was doing my natal chart reads for Donald Trump and for Elon Musk, who both, like the United States, have an interesting combination of Gemini and Cancer in their natal charts. And with Trump and Musk, one thing that is very true about them, even though for those of us on the outside it's really hard to understand, is that they have cult-like followings. They have people that are not just drawn to them for their ideas or their stances on things, and not just for their quote-unquote charisma, which, like, again, it's hard to see that if you're like a sane person, but they do have an element of charisma. But there's something even deeper than that. That's why people are drawn to them in this really cult-like way, where they will follow anything that they say and where they will really give over their own sense of autonomy and their own ability to think freely. I feel like that's probably more obvious with Trump right now, and because Musk is, for various reasons, people are kind of turning against him or seeing his shadow side more right now. But I think when you research his life and you learn about the way that he's run his companies and the different kind of manipulative ways that he manages people that are close to him, this cult leader energy kind of comes out more. And so another time, maybe I'll go deeper into their charts, because I do think it's so interesting how there's this Cancer and Gemini overlap with them in the United States. But the shadow of Cancer that I think is really relevant to the United States natal chart, that also Trump and Musk kind of both embody, is this energy that says, I will take care of you, and lures people in, especially, so in the case of Trump and Musk, and the United States too, it lures people in that have what you might call mommy or daddy issues, like caretaker issues. Like, they don't really know what it feels like to be taken care of by someone who loves you in a healthy way. And so they're drawn to these really culty energetics and people that do promise to take care of them, even though they also betray them. And so in the United States, this Cancer, the ideal manifestation of this, which I guess in various ways the U.S. has had this in, various times of its existence. But the ideal manifestation is the quote that is on the Statue of Liberty that says, give me your tired and your poor and your huddled masses, and, says I will take you in, I will nourish you, I will hold you, I will protect you, I will create safety for you. That's Cancer's, highest potentials. But the shadow form of that is an energy that says, come in, I will take care of you, I will protect you, I will nourish you, I will give you what you need. But there's also something that they are wanting to get in exchange, or there is also manipulation happening alongside that care and protection. And USAID is a really good example of this, and some people might get mad at me if they don't know the whole reality of USAID. USAID has provided food and other resources to countries around the globe. But first of all, usually it was providing those things in the aftermath of some kind of, maybe not in the case of natural disasters, but a lot of times it's been in the aftermath of some kind of war or some kind of other really bad situation that was the fault of the West or the United States. And then also USAID is a CIA front, they will move operations into countries under the guise of offering aid, and they will offer some aid, but along with that aid will come manipulative actors who are seeding different types of propaganda in that country, who are weaseling their way into the, having effect on the government of that country. So that's happened many times over the course of the existence of USAID. And I feel like that's such an interesting manifestation of the shadows of this Cancer energy. So here's Jupiter and Mercury. Right now, Jupiter and Mercury are conjunct at the very end of Gemini, and this is an interesting energy too. It does make me, I'm really curious to see how this shifts as soon as they both move into Cancer, which happens tomorrow, because this is an energy of very fragmented narratives and all kinds of different stories being told and propagated, and different sides of different stories being told. And, I see on my social media all of the posts that are supporting the protesters against ICE. But I occasionally see on the local stuff that comes up for me, like the local news channels posting about it. And then in Southwest Virginia, where I live, I see the locals who are responding to that, saying get them, go ICE, I pledge allegiance to ICE, sicko, long streams of comments. And I don't think that they're all bots. So anyway, as is the general case in this country, when there are big events like this, there are people looking at it from very different perspectives and, saying very different things, propagating very different narratives. So I do think that is showing up as this Jupiter conjunct Mercury right now. But Jupiter is about to enter Cancer. It's going to be there for a year. So it's going to transit all of these Cancer placements in the United States natal chart. And it's really interesting because mostly anyone who knows anything about economics thinks there's going to be a recession coming in the second half of the year. And that's totally counterintuitive to what this Jupiter transit says. Jupiter is the planet of expansion and abundance. And, especially this Venus conjunct natal Jupiter in the United States chart, astrologers will interpret that as America's abundance, America's abundant natural resources. They say that we're unlikely to, ever have a food shortage here, that kind of thing because of this placement. So I am just very interested to see how it ends up manifesting. This, if you were just looking out of context at this transit, you would say that this is going to be a time of greater abundance for America. And, I try to follow a lot of experts who aren't astrologers to help me come to my mundane astrological conclusions. And most of the experts say that there's going to be contraction. There's going to be the opposite of abundance in terms of the economy here, and maybe in terms of the supply chain, maybe in terms of our ability to, have avocados and bananas all season long, or these kind of privileges that we're used to here. So we will see, and we will learn in real time about Cancer and Jupiter as this transit goes on. It is also interesting that they just got done, I guess, dismantling USAID, because this also could look like an expansion of America's programs to share resources and support other countries, but it kind of doesn't seem like we're in the phase of life of the organism of the country where that's going to be happening so much anymore, but we'll see. And so then there's also Saturn and Neptune transiting America's IC, this point at the very bottom of the chart, which is 0-1 Aries. And in mundane astrology, this part of the chart relates to land. It relates to the homeland. So having Saturn here as these immigration raids, these ICE raids are happening, to more and more extreme proportions. These completely illegal deportations and a very obvious attempt to terrorize immigrants in this country, no matter what their technical legal status is. That feels super aligned with Saturn coming through here. So Saturn in its shadow form is a clamp down. It is an overbearing, authoritarian presence. And Aries has the feeling of emergency and urgency. It has the feeling of kind of impulsivity, which, a lot of what ICE is doing is not impulsive. It's very intentional and very planned. But the chaoticness of a lot of these arrests and deportations and the way that they have, gotten the wrong people in various ways. Not that there's any right people for them to get, but there's been instances that they just arrested a Chilean tourist in New York, or there's been different, things where it seems a little bit random. And I do think that the intent there is to terrorize, so it's not super random. But I feel the sense of Aries energy where it's very unpredictable and things just kind of spontaneously burst out or erupt. And yeah, so the shadow side of Saturn here is super aligned with this transit. And Neptune, I always find it hard to say much about Neptune because it's an energy that kind of lurks in the background, and it's almost too big and too overwhelming to even see clearly or put your finger on. But I think this maybe speaks to, the larger kind of fascist plan that is operating behind the scenes. And I don't think everybody in the Trump administration is on the same page about what exactly they're doing or what their end goals are. And if you look back at my post-election videos about where I said the U.S. Pluto return is here, I go into deep detail about that, what I think the different factions are that are acting together in the Trump administration. So I think that Neptune could be maybe speaking to some of that energy that's in the background. But then also, this Saturn very much corresponds to the protests themselves and the pushback. And so we have these Aries themes of survival and of the warrior archetype of, defense and taking a stand and, a very fiery, courageous energy that's definitely also being embodied by the Gaza Freedom Flotilla and the other people taking action overseas. And so this is, whether you're called to protest or not, that is a personal decision, and you have to feel into that. Your soul knows what to do. But for those who are called to put their bodies on the line and to use this Saturn in Aries in that, kind of overt way of pushing back against the fascism, I think that is such a beautiful way to be manifesting this energy. And if it is not for you, If that is not where you're called to put your body and your energy right now, there may be something else that is just as subversive and just as intentional and courageous and warrior-esque that you can find to do, or that you are already doing, that will help you use this Saturn energy. So I think those are the main things I wanted to say about the natal chart today. There is a lot more to talk about here, and over the next month, I'm going to cover the upcoming United States Uranus return. That's a really big deal that we will be living through. I think it's exact 2027 to 2028. But we're going to start to feel the tentacles of it once Uranus moves into Gemini. That happens next month. Yeah, this is the one. If y'all don't know, there have been 2 other United States Uranus returns, and the most recent one was in 1944. And the one before that was in 1861. So the other 2 Uranus returns happened at the time of America's most intense involvements in war. And so, I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what's coming this time? Maybe we'll beat the odds, but I think it's pretty important to have that analysis and that history. So I'll probably talk about that in these live streams as well. I hope to use these live streams to flesh out my ideas, and a lot of the podcasters that I listen to on a regular basis, they kind of talk about the same thing week after week, but it's always a little bit different because they're people that are learning and adding to their own analyses. This is not astrologers. Mostly I'm referring to Aaron Good and the American Exception podcast. So he talks a lot about the DS and, from a scholarly perspective, and he has different theories about its history. And I have learned a lot, not just from listening to like a one-time kind of expose, but listening to him kind of repeat the same ideas, but go deeper with them every week and do more research into them. So I have so many thoughts about the U.S. natal chart and what is coming for us, as well as just lots of other aspects of the astrology and things beyond the astrology in general too. So I hope to kind of explore those different ideas week by week. For now, I did cover, I think, what I wanted to cover here. Hope I did an okay job at making my points. Thanks for being in the chat, guys. Willow said about the Cancer energy, perhaps it represents that the abundance will be concentrated in the people ruling over the U.S. Yeah, that is definitely probably what will happen also. Although, yeah, I have my theories about that too, and I do think that the different factions in the Trump administration have different ideas about the ultimate goals of the policies that they're implementing. And I think that some of them, the techno-fascists, you should check out, there was an article in The Guardian by Naomi Klein and Astor Taylor. I think it's about a month ago, and I think it's called like End Times Fascism. And so they talk about the goals of these techno-fascists who are really accelerationists. And I don't think that those people have any abundance for America as part of their long-term plans. They have these plans to go to these breakaway civilizations, basically, and live in these kind of isolated, militarily protected techno states while the rest of the world burns. And I don't think that is necessarily going to come to fruition. One of the things that gives me hope from all of my studies of history and then looking at like the calls that people are making now, what it seems like they're trying to do, one of the things that gives me hope is that all of these people's plans never work out fully the way they think they're going to. All of the white men, all of the various cabals that have been pulling the strings of power behind the scenes in the West, whether you're talking about Alan Dulles and the people around him who probably killed JFK, or whether you're talking about Cheney and Rumsfeld and them orchestrating, 9/11. Don't think I'm too crazy. I've done really deep research into this, not just like YouTube documentaries. But, there have been these different small groups of men, white men, that have thought they could fully orchestrate world events. And they have been wrong, even though they have had the power and they have had all the opportunities that one could have to, kind of fully take over in one way or another. They have not been able to do that. And so I think that the ones now, also the techno-fascists, I think they live in a bubble. I think they underestimate the way that humanity will come together, both to protest what they're doing and also to take care of themselves. Because sometimes I hear about these breakaway civilizations. You can look up Prospera on Honduras to get a sense of what I'm talking about there. Sometimes I hear about these things and I'm like, go fucking live there. Like, just leave us alone. Like, let us take care of ourselves. All of you psychopaths, like, go isolate yourself somewhere. But they won't leave us alone is the problem, and they need slave labor to extract the resources that create the technology that they're going to depend on. So anyway, did I finish that thought? Well, okay, and I'll just say, like, I think maybe Trump, maybe some of the other people in his administration do think that the tariffs and the other economic policies that they're implementing, as well as just the fascism, maybe they do think that that is going to bring abundance. And I think that they will just be wrong about that, and maybe it will be a harsh awakening. But I think there are some other parts of the factions that just literally want to crash the economy, and maybe they have some plan to like jump to Bitcoin and like eliminate fiat altogether. That's also, something that's way out there, but these people are way out there. I'm checking the chat here. Yeah, Sherry, is there anything particular you want to say about what was happening in Texas? Yeah, feel free to share if there's any more details you want to offer there. I do think Texas is its own interesting situation. I've been meaning to look at the astrology for Texas. Yeah, because I've had visions for a long time of Texas seceding, and yeah, I've just had some very dark visions of that part of the country. So to conclude here, I'm going to pull 2 oracle cards. So I have been working with these amazing decks since the winter. They are both in the Wild Unknown series by Kim Kranz, and I used these in my rising sign horoscope, so some of y'all might have seen them already. I had been looking for a long time for an oracle deck that I felt went deep both in the imagery and the descriptors, and I really feel like I found what I was looking for with these decks. And so I'm just going to pull one each of these cards every week, and they are energies and themes and processes and archetypes, of course, that we'll ask for some guidance for the coming week as Jupiter moves into Cancer and as we swing into the Jupiter-Saturn square. Okay, I pulled these. I'm just going to look at the chat again. Okay, terminal health event. Okay, I've had that thought too. I do think, me and lots of other astrologers have just had the intuitive sense that Trump isn't gonna last forever. And I do think there was a lot of delusion about that was happening right after the election, when there was this blue QAnon stuff going on, and there were a lot of astrologers that I wish would take responsibility for their role in promoting this delusional idea that Kamala Harris was going to come out and accuse Trump of election fraud, and then everything was going to just turn around from there. That was very sad and kind of disturbing to witness how much astrologers were contributing to that. And I know that myself and many other intuitives, not only astrologers, have had this sense that Trump is not going to last that long. Jupiter is common in death charts. You often see Jupiter making an aspect to somebody's sun or somebody's moon at the time of their death. And Jupiter is going to be conjunct Trump's Cancer placements, not for a little while, because Trump has his sun is in Gemini, but his Venus is in Cancer, and maybe his Mercury too. I forget right now. I'm not going to pull it up because I might mess up my technology. But it is possible. And then also, I have my suspicion that there are, elements of the DS that didn't want Trump to be president, but they kind of have found a way to use him. But it's definitely rational that the techno-fascists would rather have him out of the way and have their boy JD in the top presidential seat. So, obviously Trump's old and can't be that healthy, and so who knows, maybe there could be a health event that's just spontaneous, but there also, I don't know, there may be something sneakier behind the scenes going on with that too. And yeah, Texas. I want to hear anything else y'all want to share. If you want to put it in the comments after I post this video about the situation in Texas. I definitely know about the abortion ban. I did not know there's a ban on legal hemp. And that's so weird because aren't there all these libertarians who smoke a ton of weed in Texas? That piece is, I really wonder how they rationalize that. All THC is set to be a felony in any amount in September. Doesn't Joe Rogan live in Texas and smoke weed on air in his show? Well, maybe I'm getting some parts of that wrong, but yeah, that all seems very counterintuitive. Okay, so I pulled two cards here. One of them feels very relevant to this conversation today. The archetype card is the King. And then I also pulled a card from the Alchemy deck that I have never pulled before. So this will be a nice surprise. This is the New Pearl. I'm going to read that one first. Okay, so there are some keywords: grit, irritation, and waiting. And then the description says, the new pearl is one of the greatest promises of alchemy. From a single grain of sand, the pearl forms slowly but surely in the salty mouth of the oyster. The new pearl emerges as an alchemical miracle, a sight unimaginable at the outset. That said, the process is generated from irritation itself. Such is the medicine of the new pearl card. The work is underway, but the gem is not yet formed. Don't become petty and hasty, seeking a return on your efforts. Rather, turn to patience, consistency, and humility to remedy the discomfort. Let the magic of time and salt water do its work. Relax, believe, and support a fellow alchemist in finding the grit that will become their pearl. Don't worry about you right now. The entire ocean is your ally. And it also says the pearl is made from only 1 grain of sand, 1 irritant. Take a moment to thank this irritant for being so consistently challenging, allowing the pearl to begin its formation. And to go deeper, you could read The Pearl by John Steinbeck, and you could ponder the pearl turning back to sand. And let's read the king, and then I will reflect on these a little, and I would love to hear what comes through for y'all also with the combination of these two energetics. So for the king, we have some keywords: the ruler, the commander, the emperor. If our lives are imagined as a kingdom containing the entire spectrum of human experience, the king presides over it all. Through the lens of the king, we assess the state of our land, make decisions, and rule accordingly. Therefore, the king must be thoroughly and regularly vetted so as to avoid corruption. Recognize the dual nature of the king. He is either seated in benevolence and strength, guiding you towards peace, or he is oppressing the weak out of a need to control. There is not much middle ground. Some think of the king as the ultimate expression of the ego, yet the great kings of mythology and history serve from an egoless place. They take their throne with grace and humility, knowing the divine uses them as a channel to heal deep and long-standing discrepancies in the kingdom. And then some lighter expressions of the archetype are benevolence, divine leadership, service, and nobility. Some shadow expressions are oppression, the misuse of power, and corruption. And once the king's relationship to divinity is broken or challenged, he often acts from a place of fear, scrambling to uphold his image and power. The king is necessary. He is a bridge between the eternal and the day-to-day. It is also said that it is necessary for the king to die. This is a death of ego. Well, I mean, it'll be an interesting week. Those messages right there with the king, like they do kind of point to maybe something related to Trump. Like there is also the Mars-Uranus square that's like a little, shorter term of a transit than Jupiter square Saturn, but that's also, I think, exact on the 15th. And that is an energy where it's kind of explosive and unpredictable. And Mars at the end of Leo being the sign associated with regality and with kings. Yeah, so definitely some interesting little hints there with that one. There's also definitely some Saturnian energy in both of these cards. And I feel like this message about the irritant that creates the pearl, it has some resonance with protesting and all of the Saturn often brings experiences where we feel like we are not getting results on our efforts. So Saturn a lot of times says, work harder, do more, be patient, show up day by day, be humble. And so, I think one maybe message of this card for all of us on the personal level is a reminder to keep being that irritant in the system, however you're going to do it, whether it's with your physical body or whether it's with your words, your ideas, your way that you're showing up for your community, anything that you can do that keeps, that throws sand in the gears of the oppressive systems, which are not just the physical ones. They're not just embodied by the ICE people in their military get-ups. The systems also live inside of us. They're in our relationships. They're in, the way that the choices that we make around how we use our energy. And if you can just keep irritating those gears, if you can just keep putting in little bits of subversion, this is a really powerful time to be working with energies in that way. And, using that subversive energy day after day. Now I'm forgetting, I feel like there were other messages in there too, or things that jumped out to me. But there's a lot in those descriptions, so you may want to listen back to me reading them multiple times if you want, and take note of how it might apply in your personal life. And I'll just check the comments one more time before I jump off. Yeah, this is Texas and the legal hemp business and all the independent businesses. I am really surprised about that too. I'm really surprised that there's not more pushback from all the libertarians. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised because libertarians are just, mostly they're really all talk, and when it comes to action, they are just slopping up the state propaganda. But I don't know, it seems very overt to pass such a strong law against cannabis, especially when we're in this overall situation where there's been more and more legalization around the country. Yeah, and Sherry is also just talking about hatred. And yeah, I mean, it's been under the surface always here in the United States, and there has been a deliberate effort, to have us well-meaning liberal types unaware of the right-wing sentiments that have always been around, right? It's, to a certain extent, it of course now is just more acceptable to be racist and, embrace right-wing ideologies. So there's obviously a huge shift in how normalized it is, but it's also, really a mistake that I think a lot of liberals kind of deliberately make to think that it hasn't always been here and that it hasn't always been being fostered by an element of the government. And beyond that, just in a spiritual sense, the hatred, the anger, this is America's birthright. This is what we were born from. The fascism, the genocide, the death, the theft. This is the root of this country. And it's one of my just biggest things that gets me worked up is when there are liberal narratives that want to position Trump and the rising fascist tide that's happening now as an anomaly, and stick with this mythos that America has mostly done good for the world, especially since the end of World War II, we've been doing good things. That is a lie. That is just not the reality. And that is a narrative that absolves us Americans of the question of what it means to live in the imperial core. And there are a lot of privileged liberal types, and they're not even all white, who really want to slurp up that narrative, that mythos of oh yeah, things are happening that are bad here, and we had some bad stuff in our past, but we've been doing good things for the world since World War II. No, you're incorrect about that, and you need to do some research and get educated if that is still what you believe about America. All right, some other good stuff in the comments here. I am going to get off. I hope that it saves the comments when I post the live stream so people see when they watch later, but I'm not sure if it's going to do that or if I needed to like set up something special. So if not, I apologize. I am so grateful for the people that showed up here and chatted, and I hope to see y'all again next week. Next week, this will be the day of the Jupiter-Saturn square on June 15th, so I'm sure we will have more to talk about. And in the meantime, prayers up for all of the courageous people all around the world, putting their bodies on the line, putting their lives on the line, standing up for life and for justice beyond their singular egos. I'm so grateful to everyone taking those actions, and I hope that my own work is doing my own little part at being an irritant in the system and putting some narratives out there that contradict the bullshit slop that is coming from most of our media. So I'll be back. My Mercury in Aries will be back with maybe some more hot takes. Thank you so much for being here, and see you next time. All right, bye guys.